allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I just need the approval of the minutes from October 23rd.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. 2-minute public participation. Do you have any questions, concerns, or comments?
Hi, Jacob Mari, 32 Stewart Drive. So I have a question about agenda item G3 with regard to transportation contract. So earlier today, I was just looking over this item and some of the policy regulations for the BOE, particularly 3020, which states that any contract over $7,500, I believe, needs to go out to competitive bid before it gets approved. For the suggested board actions here, it includes voting to pursue the contract without going to competitive bid. So I was just kind of curious why that would be an option, or if there's some sort of thing that I'm missing here.
After we get all the questions, well,
All right.
thank you, Jacob.
Deb Getz, 176 Kate Lane. I'm confused why there's even a meeting tonight. On October 23rd, which was supposed to be your last regular scheduled meeting, you added a special meeting for tonight with the explanation that you would have the administrators and teachers' contracts that might not have been approved the last time, so you might have to do that. And you also had the Birch Grove. You thought there was going to be a contract that would be time sensitive and needed to be addressed tonight. Neither of those things are on the budget, on the agenda. I see items G1 through G5, and they all seem that they would be better addressed by the people we just elected last night. Really not by the people sitting here, although you would still be here. But they're better addressed. Meeting schedule, I sent you a letter. I told you when that was done 2 years ago. It was done by the newly elected board. That's the old board. This is the old board. We have the new board. They were elected last night. The people spoke. We know who we want to represent us up here and make the decisions for the school. This meeting was not scheduled as a regular meeting. It's a special meeting. So I'd like you to go through G1 through G5 and explain why each of those items must be addressed tonight. A special meeting means that you have something that has to be addressed that is time sensitive. I don't see that any of these are. Thank you.
Thank you, Deb. Else?
Hi, Kate Val, 80 Tolland Street. It's a big day yesterday, huh? So I just want to take a second to acknowledge that and wish congratulations and the like. And while I see she's not here this evening, I wanted to take a moment to publicly acknowledge and thank Michelle Harrell for her service. I had the pleasure to sit next to Michelle back in the peanut gallery for quite a while before she stepped up to run and become part of the board. I'm familiar with the level of engagement as a resident. I look forward to continued engagement from her as a resident. And really noted, I feel that it's a loss for this community that the level of resource that she offers from the historical perspective and her chairing many boards, many committees and such. It's going to be a loss, but I just really wanted to take a minute to thank her. Sorry, I can't be more about it.
Thank you, Kate.
Thank you.
Hi.
Hi
Hi, this is Costa, 54 Josiah Lane. I also want to publicly thank Jeff that I didn't get to thank last time for your service. I know I said it out loud, but I want to say it again. And thanks to Colleen and Sam and then Jane, obviously, for also your service as well. And then also for Michelle. I also think it's going to be a huge loss for Tom and all community schools. I'm sure she'll stay active in some way, but it's a really lot. So again, thank you all for your service.
Correspondence, I think I've got one correspondence today. Right? That was brought up tonight. Thank you for that. And any other correspondence? Michelle's not here, so I don't think she didn't forward anything. Points of information. Mostly we're going to be covering tonight, but is there anything specific you wanted to answer?
I think some of that's going to be on the scope of me. With respect to transportation, we're going to get into transportation as that line item. But as far as the other G items in the reason for holding a meeting, for me, I think other reasons that came up were the proximity to the November break of the other meeting. For me, most recently, transportation has become the thing that I would think wanted to be talked about tonight. But I respect anyone's opinion on that. But if I were to answer that question directly, and I think I'm not the only one who matters here, I would say for me, I'd like to get transportation, that conversation started as soon as possible.
Just because it doesn't mean we're going to vote on it.
No, but I do want to get the information out there, put it out and start talking about it as soon as possible so that it can have some background as we go along. We don't have many meetings between now and January. So it's possible that that particular item could end up getting pushed back and back, and then we just have to go out for bid. I can say that I think we've had contracts for some 20 years with First Student. We have not gone out to competitive bid each time. I think that we have a policy of 50-40 on transportation. What you're referring to is in its language, it's talking about altering property, architectural, engineering, things like that. Those kind of services. Transportation, I think traditionally in Tolland has not always done that. So that's the answer to that. But having said that, the reason that this is on the table is that there are some things about this that are important to get out there so that you have a chance to chew on them before we have to just bid. And if we have to just bid out, then we have to just bid out. But this particular option is not a bad one. So starting with that, have that conversation tonight.
And I just want to point out, we are still the current leaders here, so there's some new board members that, it's true, Deb.
It's based on the charter,
The charter
actually.
change, yeah.
We
I
are in
understand
place until the 12th.
So,
But this was not a regularly scheduled
It
meeting, that was
is a
my
timely
point.
thing, though, that on the agenda for the contract for the transportation stuff. And from our previous meeting, there was a possibility that Birch Grove was gonna have to come up to be spoken about, so that's why we did it. And we were moving it up because of Thanksgiving,
Well, it makes sense to have 2 meetings in November.
right?
If you can.
Because we typically cancel that second meeting in November because it's right before Thanksgiving.
That's the way this was lined up. It just happens to be that, in all logical sense, you want to have 2 meetings in November. There's a lot to talk about here. It happens to be that it lined up with the rest of this, the election and everything, so it's just happening to be the way it lines up. You can do whatever you wish with whatever items are on here. And that would be different if you absolutely could not do anything you wish with any of the things that are on here, but you can. So.
Christina had a question or comment?
I just have a point of information in regards to what Deb said. I did send board leadership an email earlier. I would like to read it in 2 minutes. Again, I'm confused by your agenda tonight. The November 6th meeting was scheduled for one of two reasons: teacher's contract approval or Birch Grove building project, needing approval for things prior to Thanksgiving holiday. Neither of these are on the agenda for tonight. I don't see anything on here that is so pressing that it can't wait until November 13th. Transportation would be the agenda item that I would question the transparency around a vote tonight before a new board comes in. I think this agenda should be moved until next week. Thank you for your consideration. And now, based on that, based on the responses I got, I really thought this meeting should have been moved. So I did some refreshers on our policies, and I do agree with Deb that this is a special meeting, and it was not filed in accordance with 9130. And therefore we should not be having it. And I do agree with Jacob when I looked at the transportation policies. There's nothing in there regarding bidding. 3020 talks about, purchases of services and goods. And I think that no matter what we talk about tonight, that we should definitely, in accordance with policy, go to bid. That's all.
I think we should.
This is
Thank you,
very,
Deb.
it's very easy if you wanna go to bid. It's just, here's the thing. I'm putting it out because I'm not gonna be the reason you get a worse deal.
So can you say that again?
I am not going to be the reason that you get a worse deal.
Okay, so you think that going out to bid may get us a worse deal?
No, I just wanna put all the information out there so there's enough time to look at it. But if you choose to go to bid, which you have every right to do, and I have no objection to, it's just I want you to have all of the information, and it's gonna be in front of you before you do that. The timeline just happens to be what the timeline is here. They need about 6 months to process, so we would need to go to bid very, very soon. So if the idea is that people wanna go to bid, no opposition to it, why would I? But if there ends up being a worse deal, I want that this deal was on the table, and we gave you the deal that you could have up front as soon as I had it. And the decision is to do that, and it's a worse deal, I just want that to
Is the
have
current,
been an option for you
We
prior.
talk about this more than.
Yeah, so that's the point. And I will give you a more detailed response to the question about that policy, because we've had a 20-year relationship roughly with First Student, and it goes much longer than my experience here. So I can give you a much better answer to that once I research what the district does.
Sarah, I think you guys.
Yeah, we were told last meeting that Dr. Willett wanted to have this meeting because he wasn't sure about Birch Grove, and the teacher's contract may or may not have been decided last time, but he also wanted to make sure we got 2 meetings, or the board got 2 meetings in November. And the second meeting was right on top of Thanksgiving, and so it made sense to him. I don't think anybody around this table has any burning desire to be here. It's not like we're trying to, there's no decisions on the agenda. I think, how many folks are elected to the Board of Ed out here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I think we have the whole next Board of Ed in the room. If you guys want to cancel it and we can go home and you can figure out how to have 2 meetings in November, knock yourselves out. But you're all here, so you might as well listen. And if you have questions, there's an opportunity to ask questions within the agenda, or Colleen, you could make exceptions and allow next Board of Ed members opportunities each step of the way to interact. And I'm so tired of getting bogged down on why are we doing whatever we're doing? Every single meeting we talk about why are we doing. And for you 6 folks out here and the folks coming back, it's been very difficult being on the Board of Ed. I think we've been challenged and been defending stuff for a long time. And Dr. Willett, bless you. Good luck going forward. But I wish you guys the opportunity to actually focus on students, children, teaching and learning. Because a lot of this stuff, like we're talking about now, we had a meeting until 11 o'clock, our last meeting, and part was because we were talking about procedural stuff for over an hour. I think maybe you guys will do a better job than we did, but it gets awfully tiring. Jacob, bus contract, most districts don't go out to bid for bus contracts each time. Every once in a while you will go out to competitive bid, but you'll find that districts have found that they get better results by not bidding it each time, and that's consistent across
165 districts. A number of districts have had the same transportation company in place for a long time. It's not just cost, it's the relationship and things that would be hard to rebuild. And I believe there's, at the state level, there's specific language. I was just looking for it, but I can't find it. So, you know, I think Dr. Willett could probably come up with how that works. But if you talk Shipman and Goodwin, we're well within. And even look back at how long the same transportation company has been here in town. You know, it's been a long time. It's not because we haven't competitively bid it. We periodically competitively bid it, but often that doesn't get the best result. I work for a district right now where we just went through this process with our transportation company, and I'm pretty confident that, well, we're not that far enough along, but it's, you decide whether you want to competitively bid it, and there's good reasons not to, often.
And I know people may not like it, but I don't think there's a violation of 9130. I mean, I think there are things that people can always do better, but I don't think you have a violation of 9130. The town wouldn't let us do something that's a violation of 9130. They kind of police things.
Alright, we're ready to move on to, let's move along right past the students' report.
So Coffee House auditions, TYSCT, Tolland Youth Services Community Theaters Coffee House. The auditions were Monday, October 28th, and the event will be held in the THS cafeteria on November 8th. The Tolland High School Quarter 1 music concert was October 30th. That features the women's choir, the chamber choir, and jazz band, and let me tell you, it was absolutely fantastic. NHS, our school's chapter of the National Honor Society, did leaf raking on November 3rd. We raked the entirety of the lawns of 3 houses around town, so three willing participants volunteered their lawns to be
I live at 103 Goose.
Then on the same night, NHS, it was a busy day for National Honor Society. I barely got any rest that day. We also went to Tolland Fest, which many people went to, and that was basically just high school clubs and teams showing themselves off and presenting games for kids and passersby to play at the high school. In addition to that, it's also DECA month. So specifically this week, there are a bunch of different meetings about the different sections of DECA and like marketing, etc.
So on October 26th, we had homecoming at the high school. I think there was more turnout than ever, it seemed to be. There's a lot of people. And then the week leading up was Spirit Week, and we had pep rally on the Friday before. And we had been working on like less competitive forces between the grades, which I think is still work in progress. I think there is definitely some change we've seen, but I think that we're going to continue working on less pining against each other for each grade for the future years.
You know, I just wanted to add a little bit of student perspective. There was a possible date change agenda item last meeting, and it was voted on, and if people have such a problem with it, they could have voiced that earlier.
Thank you. And I just want to say I was there at the concert. It was really good. You guys played amazing instruments. Oh my god. The jazz music and the chamber choir was amazing too.
I'm going to Carnegie Hall.
I heard.
Gosh.
That's awesome. That's really good.
That's new.
Yes, that's all Mr. Fields. He's pushing.
Oh. Okay.
Yeah, he's pushing them so hard, and they are receptive to every bit of his teaching.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you guys. Alright.
Right. So, as is
You
tip.
can't put this up though. Sandra.
Sorry. Sorry. Let me call the IT. Come on.
The other one.
I'm joking. Thanks. See, I need the science. You didn't tell me where the mouse went. Hold on, I think we got it, and do you have control of this, Colin, or no? Do you have the wireless thing?
Sorry,
Is that
this chair
working?
is helping me with some
That's okay.
things I didn't know I could do.
Okay, so we're all good? Just like
I guess so.
everybody good?
Very sensitive.
All right.
So, just before you start, I didn't really realize, Sam just told me that I can treat this also as a transition meeting. Normally, you just talk at public participation, but since there's new board members and apparently I can do it that way, new members, congratulations first of all to all of you, that you can come up and one at a time or however, ask questions. So it's also a learning opportunity if you're interested. Isn't that nice?
Well, what I suggested is just like after the financial report, if any of the new board members have questions, just like we would ask questions about the
Yeah.
financial report, allow the new board members to ask questions. And then if we have anything we might want to add for the next board, we have the opportunity to do that as well.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Sam, for telling me that, and I didn't realize my microphone was off.
Oh, sorry about that.
That's okay. All right.
Good, okay. So as is typically the case, in the first meeting of the month, we do the financial report. There's nothing too terribly interesting per se. This time, this is our fourth month in. Our balance has gone down by, Mark, what was it, like,
At least 1.5 million.
so we're down by about 1.5 million from the previous month. The current balance of about 1.3 million, which is 1,364,991, or 3.41% of the budget. Having dropped about 1.5 million from last month, it's trending just about the way we would expect. We have a series of things. Transfers, as you probably recall, transfers our energy budget. The loan then pays for the geothermal system as well as the amount that we're incurring for energy. And it's all wrapped up in the same payment. So the USIF payment or UISF payment was made, and that typically happens around this time of year as well. As in a future meeting, we'll probably be talking a little bit about USIF. As was designed, there's a good balance there, so we're able to do some projects out of that fund, and that is something that has been an excellent aspect of that, which is a credit to Steve Worker, who had, I think, was a brainchild of that at some point. And so, a typical year, we build that budget 18 to 20 months in advance. This is pointed out here. And we'll be starting that process for this year very shortly. We already have had our first meeting and started the workshop process. So we'll be talking about this coming year's budget, much like we did this one. And it's usually about that 18 to 20 months before you actually put it into effect, which is why things can change and often do change. And we'll be talking about that as we go through the next couple of months and do our workshops. The capital improvement plan was put forward, and a request was made of the town very recently, as you know. And they're in the process of reviewing that. And I met with the town manager and some other members of the town staff just this week, and we're looking like we're coming into landing place on that with respect to the things that we'll be able to do as a town for capital this year. So at this point, that's actually where we're at, and I don't anticipate anything unusual.
Is the tuition education agency line overspent right now because of timing of payments? Or is there another reason for it to be at -622 at the moment?
So it's,
Where excess cost is.
Yeah, the excess cost payment hasn't been received yet, the first excess, so you're gonna have a negative there, because there's, two of them, and we haven't received either yet, so.
There we go. Can everybody see
I'm
that?
looking at this, hold on.
It's also in the packet.
Oh. So, does the board have any questions?
I was just gonna ask the use of, payment to the town, it's a one payment to the town, right? We don't do
Once
that in
a year,
two.
around this time.
Okay, I think that's something else.
And I should give credit to it. The use of was a lot of people, actually, the board at the time and the town council all pulled together to make that happen, so it was a good effort.
Sam, can I have Sam and then Christine?
Absolutely, yep.
Sorry.
And I just wanted to make sure all the new board members know Mark McLaughlin, who's our financial, our business manager. I'm not quite sure what your exact title is, but who puts together.
Numbers guru.
Yeah, numbers guru, wealth of information. When we have questions for Mark, we go through Dr. Willett, but you all should know Mark and who he is. Say hi, Mark.
You might get a lot of questions tonight, Mara.
Okay.
Christine, you had a question?
Can I find this somewhere out there? Is this online,
So this
to look
is,
at it closer?
Yeah, this is in the minute, this will be in the minutes, and it's actually part of the superintendent's monthly report.
Okay.
It's in the board packet.
It's in the board packet.
Packet. It's a couple of
It's on
places.
the superintendent report.
Thank you.
And the font is always too small.
Sorry.
It's just a lot, to the credit, there's a lot of information there. It's one of the more comprehensive, documents that's typically put out there. So it's got a lot of info on it. It's how it gets kind of spit out. But you can see it better in the reports. And you can blow it up with the image.
I mean, if you'll indulge me for just like 3 minutes, could you mind? Well, it's not my place. It's just, I mean, you're right, it's a lot of information. The lines on here are from the standard chart of accounts, so this is the same way that every district reports in these same categories. If you're used to looking at financial reports, like corporate financial reports, this is a little different. It's budget basis accounting, so it's not GAAP accounting. Anytime the district wants to cut a PO, they have to record it on here. So in order to order something, you have to record it on here. That's the encumbrance line. Encumbrance basically means stuff that we've committed to that we haven't yet expended. And that's why Mark can say that there's $1.3 million left. Well, it's not that we haven't spent all but $1.3 million. It's that he's committed salaries to the end of the year, committed basically all major items to the end of the year, and not everything, but a lot of known expenditures have been committed, and that's why even though it's only November, you can say there's only $1.3 million left at the end of the year. So hope that helps orient you a little bit to the report.
I just wanted to get an explanation on the stipends line.
Oh,
Looks like it's overspent already.
So that the stipends, I think, are related to pay to play. Mark? Stipends are currently over as pay to play funds haven't been received. That's typically why we're not paid to the stipends.
Right, we still need the pay-to-play monies to come in.
Right, the money does not get collected for pay to play fully
Oh, so
until
that's
the
where it
end of the
goes.
year. So stipends typically go over until all of that is collected. And it's in the hundreds, that.
So everybody
You'll
just,
at this time of year, you will typically see stipends over because of that.
because you're
And you'll
paying
see
the
tuition.
coaches, you're paying the coaches, and we haven't yet received the money from the parents
Right,
for
so
the kids that play sports.
right now, the families subsidize sports pretty heavily here.
Right.
So the money is not all collected at the end of the year, it's 3 seasons. So
Yeah.
you'll see that stipends are typically gonna be running like that at the beginning of the year, and so will tuitions, because excess cost is not received. So things like
Yeah.
that.
And just a slight clarification in language, since we have new folks here. It's not that we paid the coaches, because if you look at that line, there's $445,000 encumbered, which means we've recognized that salary in this report. It hasn't been paid yet, but that's been recognized in this report.
And you spent $38,000 on that line.
Right.
Yes, while I'm at it, I might as well ask about the other large negative. I assume the student transportation services line that's negative is also a payment timing, or is that actually gonna hold?
Well, it's slightly, but the buses continue to be encumbered to meet the student population needs, so it's over a little bit due to special education needs, but it's an encumbrance, so it's coming back into that. When you have to get a special education bus, they tend to be sometimes at $370 a day by themselves.
Bless you.
Any other questions from newly Board of Ed members?
Sam, just real quick, you said something. So any questions that you guys have on this, you typically send through Dr. Willett and not
Yes.
directly to the source?
And thank you for asking that. That's an important point. That's rules of decorum for this board. We go through Dr. Willett, and that way he understands what's being asked. You know, he's our window into the school district.
Well, and the workload of the people involved, we have to cycle through the workload.
I just have a question. So say you take a line item and you just talk about like the stipends. Is there a way to break that down even more and be like, what are we giving stipends for? Like how much and who's getting it? Like, you know, things of that nature.
Yeah, it's a good question. You can ask it, and then what I'll do is typically, especially in budget season, what I'll try to do is a question like that will come up, and I'll create a little matrix of the question and then an answer. And there are a lot of questions like that. Like, what is excess cost? How does that difference from educational cost sharing? Or what's stipends made of? And so this is the season. We'll be doing those community budget workshops. Those kind of questions will come up. Some of them you'll get answers to like right off the bat. What we do is rotational kind of things. Some of which I'll put in a little matrix and post it online and break it all down. Because they can make up a lot of different things. So I prefer to do something like that in writing, because if I answer it right now and say just sports, there might be some things I'm missing that I think of later. So it's just good to give a written response document.
Well, not that you think of, that you just check on it, and that are.
Well, yeah, like, that would also, what I would be thinking too is we pay clubs and we pay the advisors. Are the advisors on the stipends? I think they are, but sometimes, I want to make sure that's the case before I, make that final statement. And typically they won't respond right. But the season you're about to go into has a lot of questions like that, and then we post them out on a little matrix.
Yeah, it's really broken down, in the budget.
And then that website grows, and then,
Yeah.
you get a whole bunch of stuff.
Any other questions? Good questions. All right.
All right, so thank you so much to Mark Ruby for coming out tonight. He is going to do a science curriculum presentation. Now, we have a lot of these presentations that we'll be doing throughout the year. The CVC tapes them, and then they play back on the channel, so you'll have them for posterity. You'll become a rock star now.
You're a rock star last night.
Not sure why you become.
Yeah, that's true. It's already there. And when we post the presentation online as well, and as we keep having them, I'll be putting more and more of the posts down. And it'll be part of the superintendent's monthly report next month with the presentations as well. So, what it's doing is, it's not doing, yeah. But if you run the PowerPoint, I don't know if it's gonna probably doing. Yep.
Okay.
I forgot who I'm talking to.
Steve guy.
All right, so first of all, thank you for the opportunity to come and share this with you. There's been some pretty amazing stuff that's gone on in just the past year that I've been here, as far as the transition with science curriculum. So as many of you know, there were new standards adopted in 2015 by Connecticut, but released in 2013. You hear about the NGSS all the time probably at this point. I thought it was probably worth a moment, if you'll entertain my teachable moment here. Not a history teacher, but a quick history of what's going on with the NGSS. So it was developed by a 26 state group over a couple of years with people from industry as well as professionals, elementary, secondary, post-secondary, wide range of people that had an input on this. And so, as I said, it was released in 2013. Connecticut took a little time to get on board with it because they wanted to get a sense of whether they were going to adopt it as is, whether they were going to want to make changes. So it took a little time, but we did end up adopting as is. It is the standards that identify science and engineering practices and content for all K-12 students to master. And it's about college, career, and citizenship. So it's about all students and preparation to live in the world that we live in today. It is based on most current research for both child development and education. So it's about how students learn and how, in particular, how they learn science. So it was a well-informed process as well. And it takes some pretty significant and important steps beyond what we used to have guiding our science curriculum. The other piece is because the Common Core had already come out, there was a lot of work done to show and to be assured that it was aligned with and supported Common Core math and ELA standards and practices. So if anybody's familiar with that, you may see some of that as we go through. So the brief story is that there's three major components to the NGSS. You have your disciplinary core ideas, which you guys would be most familiar with as your content. So there's your four major areas, engineering technology being the newest of them. Connecticut used to have standards that were related to application of science in the community kind of thing. It was the STS standards, if that rings a bell with anybody. That engineering and technology piece takes it even a step further. So that was asking kids at the time to think about how science plays out in the real world. This is thinking about how we use science to solve real problems. So it's sort of that next level of approach here. The science and engineering practices are a key change as well. So there used to be inquiry standards in Connecticut, which were great, but it was very much around the scientific method and very much around lab design, which is a key skill, but it's by no means the end-all be-all of science and science learning. This is a much more comprehensive approach to it. It also breaks it down a bit more. You'll notice it's practice 5, using mathematics and computational thinking. That didn't exist before. Developing using models, practice 2 is a huge one as well. That's actually been a focus of the state professional development program because it's such a different practice than we've seen before and such a key practice for students in terms of understanding and sense making and for us to be able to see their thinking in real time. So you'll see a lot of kids developing models to represent their thinking of a particular concept, and then teachers are asking kids to revise those models throughout the unit as they learn bits and pieces of that particular phenomenon, and then that becomes a summative at the end representation of all of their learning throughout that unit. That should have been a much better and more comprehensive explanation and model by the time they get done. So those are just a couple of the pieces there. The engaging in argument from evidence too, if you happen to take a look at some of the other practices, math, ELA, even social studies, that's a key thing across all content areas, and so that's a focus of instruction for everyone. This is a big piece that's brand new in the cross-cutting concepts. This is about the bigger picture in science across content areas. Patterns, cause and effect, structure and function used to be one of the biggest ones that I taught as a biology teacher. But you think about that also in terms of molecular structure and function in chemistry. You think of it in terms of the structure and function of systems and simple machines, for example, in physical science. So that it's something that encompasses all areas, and it's a way of also sense-making in terms of looking at the bigger picture. So that is something that really didn't exist in prior versions of any kind of science standards or science guidance. The cool thing is that those three aspects, referred to as the 3 dimensions, so you see a lot of 3D stuff now, come together to create what are called the performance expectations. That's the closest thing to a standard now, is called a performance expectation. And you'll notice, and that's one example there, every single one of them is a combination of all 3. And those lovely colors we're all sick of as science teachers now, but that is the representation of those 3 dimensions. So the practices are always illustrated in blue, the disciplinary core ideas are always in orange, and the cross-cutting concepts are always in green. But you should be able to read every single performance expectation and be able to find all 3 of those pieces. What that then does, though, is it pushes science teaching quite a bit. Yeah. So it forces teaching and assessment to be 3-dimensional as well. So if we're going to want kids thinking about all of these things, we need to also be assessing them and instructing them on that. So we need to teach them how to make a good model, not just go make a model. Well, what makes a good model? What are the criteria here? And teaching them about the practices as well as the content as we go. The content, in a sense, takes a lesser focus because it's now about the engagement in the vehicle for being able to do science. So we're asking kids to apply logical, analytical thinking to problems and to learning and the content is what hopefully engages them in that process. It also makes the teacher become more of a facilitator. It is not just me spewing content at you for, God forbid in the high school, 83 minutes a day. It is about kids engaging with the content, talking to each other, talking to the teacher, doing the hands-on tasks and the investigations, getting research done, and figuring things out as they go. And again, the inclusion of the engineering piece makes it also then focus on applying science to solving human problems, a very key difference. So here in Tolland, the transition has been pretty much what you see here. There was work done prior to when I got here. There were small groups of teachers that went and did some of the writing for the bundles we now own and run. There were also some smaller learning experiences in different grades. But for the most part, when that decision was made to purchase all of the correct bundles for the entire science curriculum in 2018, that's what really pushed the major transition. There was some initial summer work done at that point, and then I came on board later that summer. And all through last year, I worked with each of the grades through half-day, full-day release times, other opportunities to really sit down with these bundles, help them understand them, particularly the elementary grades, and help them to see those instructional shifts. What's been really cool about it is it did force teachers out of their comfort zones and forced them to let kids talk more and do more of those kinds of things, and they very quickly saw the benefits of that. So it was very cool for me to see that, for them to see that, and now that's pushing the work even farther. There was, again, work done this past summer. Now that teachers have sort of seen and given the bundles a chance, there is absolutely a need to revise and make them our own and tailor them to Tolland students and Tolland's needs, and that work is being done. We're also developing significant partnerships with CREC, with Connecticut Science Center. CSTA is the Connecticut Science Teachers Association, CSSA is the Science Supervisors Association, and with college and universities in Connecticut, including Quinnipiac, Sacred Heart, Central, Eastern, Southern, and UConn. So we were able to start building new models and being part actually of a significant transition in professional development right now for science in state. So SciCamp Tolland ran in August. The teachers, middle school and high school teachers participated in that along with teachers from around the state that came. It's a free opportunity. It's an open opportunity, so it's built around the needs of the participants that come that day. So it's a cool model. It really meets the needs that are there and present in that moment and allows teachers to network and support each other. So we were privileged to be able to host that. And with the Science Center, they're looking at developing what's called a collaborative coaching model. So many of you are familiar with the programs that they offer. This tailors teacher learning to those programs. So we get the benefit of a program coming in. So we did this last year with second grade. Program came in and did pollination, which is a blast. They're buzzing around as bees and playing with Velcro. But at the same time, the teachers were observing. We had a pre-meeting and a post-meeting. Teachers observed the instruction that occurred. We had a discussion about what they should be looking for as a three-dimensional NGSS-aligned lesson, and then we were able to debrief that afterward and talk about how we were going to apply that learning to the Bridges lesson in the unit that they actually just did. So it was a win-win as far as I'm concerned. The kids got a great experience and the teachers learned from it. And so we're definitely looking to do more of that. I want to give you a quick run through of what the curriculum then looks like. I'm by no means going to expect anyone to read any of this, because there's going to be a lot. But I want you to know two things. One, it is these summaries that you're going to see in a moment are on all of the school websites. So if you go to the school website, click on Curriculum and Science, you will find these summaries of the units under each grade. Dr. Willett's also going to post this presentation, so you'll have access to it that way, so that way you can see what students are now doing as part of science. One thing I will say, though, before I do that is Tolland is ahead of the game in many ways with science, because we are a town that has science prior to 5th grade. You'd be surprised how many towns in Connecticut do not have science instruction before 5th grade. And the only reason they have it in 5th grade is because, well, there's a test. So it's really, really great that we have science here, that it is embraced by the town and by the teachers, and that kids get that exposure from the get-go. So that said, a quick version, kindergarten, you see they work on weather, so they're looking at how it impacts their lives and looking at what happens as the seasons change. The mystery class pet was the big one for last year. I actually got quite a bit of complaints from 1st and 2nd grade because they couldn't have class pets. that was the big thing there. Yeah. And then they get to learn about the initial exposure to forces by playing with matchbox cars and colliding them and doing all kinds of things, but thinking about big pushes, little pushes, poles, and things like that. In 1st grade, they start talking about patterns of sun and moon and looking at shadows and how that changes over the course of the day, over the course of the year. Talk a little bit about moon phases. They take a look at light and sound and how that's used to communicate. They actually make a soundtrack for a video clip at the end. They make up their own soundtrack based on what's happening in the video clip, which they loved. And then they get to start to think about, so in kindergarten, they learned about what animals and plants need as part, to survive as part of that unit on the mystery pet in order to keep their pet alive. Here, they're now thinking about, okay, what parts do plants and animals have to get those things? So it's that next level of learning. So you'll notice a lot of spiral levels to this as well. 2nd grade has an engineering bent to it. So in the matter and interactions, they are learning about material properties and picking the right materials for the right purposes, and they get to build a house for the 4th pig to survive the wolf, which is a fan, and rain, which is a spray bottle. So, but they get to come up with their own design, and they have to pick the right properties to sustain those particular conditions. They learn about beavers, which gets them into environments and ecology a little bit, but they also take a look at the home that they build and the engineering that goes into damming up the river and what that does to the environment around them. So that's a pretty cool thing, and they do a couple of tasks in there about simulating dams and that effect. And then they get another level again on the plants and animals in terms of now connecting how do the parts that plants and animals have in a particular environment match that environment. So it's that, again, next level of learning. As they get into TIS in grade 3, this is actually a very mystery-driven year. So initially they get into monarchs disappearing and why might that be? Again, a lot about ecology, looking also though at the parts they have to survive. There's some pretty cool things coming out of that I'll highlight later. They get into forces of motion again, but through some weird motions to engage their interest, things like levitation from magnetism. And then Harper's Fossil Find to get into things like animal structures, life cycles, a little bit of genetics and how things get passed from generation to generation, parent to offspring. All trying to determine what kind of evidence they can gather from a fossil about what that thing was and how it lived. In 4th grade, a lot of stuff around the initial exposure to plate tectonics, but a lot of erosion and erosion control. There's 2 engineering tasks here. In Unit 1, it's about trail management and protecting trails from erosion. And they do a trail walk across the street from TIS to see some of the things that are already there and then think about what they want to do. Yes, they just do that. Waves and erosion, they'll have there's a full-size stream table we now have that I'll set a coastline up in that they will have to design a protective barrier for, and then we will actually physically test it and see how they do. And then they get into biomimicry, looking again at animal parts, but how have we used them to inspire our engineering and our solutions to problems, which actually comes up a couple of times. It's a pretty cool concept, so it does repeat a little bit. And then in 5th grade, before they leave, they get into some astronomy, back to the moons and seasons at a little higher level now because they can think a little bit more abstractly, but also getting into some things about stars and life cycles and eclipses. The golden jellies of Palau is an ecology unit again, but they also get to do some stuff around photosynthesis. We're going to add a solar cell experiment in that because the jellyfish actually travel across the lake during the course of the day to follow the sun. So we're going to look at why that's a good thing for them to do. And then in Waterworld is interesting because for the most part, I don't tend to promote fake phenomena. It should be something real, it should be something that's actually going on. But the kids love Brook Riverton and then getting to investigate different kinds of things that happen with water around the world. So the incredible tides in the Bay of Fundy, there's a massive tidal variation there, the methane bubbles frozen in ice in Canada, things of that nature. So it actually works. Occasionally that does work. In middle school, 6th grade, they get into body systems and cell structure while looking at Lyme disease. How do you get it? How do you prevent it? How do you treat it? Destructive weather is the engagement there. I mean, who doesn't love hurricanes, tornadoes, and blizzards? And it's always timely with the weather we have in New England, so there's always cool stuff to talk about in the moment. And then they get into a little more cycle-oriented ecology stuff with the idea of what causes a beach to be closed for swimmers at any given time in the summer. We see that all the time, and so that's what engages them there. 7th grade's done something interesting because their units were a little different, and they were having a hard time making a good sense and creating a clear through line. And so what we've actually done is created sort of a super unit that we call change over time, because really that's what it is all about, but it's change on different levels, and different scales and different timelines. So there's a little bit of evolution in there, there's a lot of plate tectonics in there. They actually look at the Connecticut geologic map, which looks like my 4th grader colored a map of Connecticut, but there's a rationale and reason behind it that they get to learn about, and they're able to explain the map at the end. And then they get into the birds of paradise and the concept that these birds have incredible acts and plumages, and they're just like, they're out there. How are predators not ripping them apart and finding them easily? And what drives sort of what allows that to happen in one environment and not another. And then in 8th grade, collisions comes back, so it's a higher level of forces in motion. Again, pulls in the electricity and magnetism that we saw in TIS at a higher level. We have some stuff about waves, again, back with the sound and the light, again at a higher level, starting to talk about how we use them to communicate through analog versus digital waves and the technology that we have in our hands these days. Energy drinks, and then dog breeds for a little genetics and evolution. Once they get into high school, it then becomes course-based. It's a little bit less interdisciplinary and a little bit more course-based, which is the typical approach. But you will see some cross-pollination, so to speak. So you can see some astronomy, planetary motion, a little bit of Earth interactions with plate tectonics again, and some things around global climate change and our impacts on Earth resources, which is interesting. They start with a water bottle. They think about all the ways, both the production of the bottle, the extraction of the water, the throwing away the bottle at the end or recycling it. All those pieces are part of the puzzle and part of our impact just because we want a water bottle to carry around. And that's only if you're doing the right thing and not throwing it away. In bio, you can see, again, a number of your typical things, but really they're interwoven. So it's not quite so discrete. Especially ecology evolution, there's a lot of overlap there. What's cool in that one, I think, is the second unit on ecosystem dynamics talks about the reintroduction of Yellowstone's wolves. And for a while, there was a storyline in terms of them actually causing rivers to change course. That's been debunked. But that's cool. Why can't we have the kids take a look at that story, think about, well, okay, that sounds feasible, but really? And have them debunk that, and have them understand that that's a little too far. But there are tremendous interactions and changes that do occur when you put something into an environment. And then in chemistry, there's actually a bit more of an engineering bent, especially in this year in those last 2 units. But again, you see sort of a crossing of what would be typically independent units in chemistry. You start doing them together because, again, it's for a purpose. So you're doing chemical reactions along with stoichiometry, along with reaction rates, as students are playing with model airbags and thinking about, how do I maximize my reaction? Well, I gotta know how my reactants and products come together, how they work, and how can I maximize the reaction I get out of them in that split second. So again, a lot of application. Cool connections that have come up along the way. So I mentioned in 3rd grade, they've really latched on to that Monarch unit. We've had a simulated migration. Some of the classes sent paper monarchs to schools in Mexico where the monarchs go on their migration. In the spring, those schools will send monarchs back to us. And so we have a connection there. They also want to build a monarch way station out in the front toward the street side. There's a small garden already. We want to expand upon that and make it both a place for caterpillars as well as adults to be able to survive and go on the next year. We have the opportunity, we haven't connected yet, with a Yale paleontologist for that grade 3 fossils unit to bring them in and talk about what they do. Again, as many people as we can get connected to. Grade 6 brought in a DEEP lab technician who tests for Lyme disease, tests the ticks for Lyme disease. And so she got a chance to talk about her job, but also bring in tons of specimens. Kids love all that kind of stuff, so they had a blast. We also have a number of resources. Science A to Z is available through Learning A to Z, which we have for ELA. Kids and teachers have loved that immediately. They dove into it as soon as we gave them access and loved it. Gizmos is available, 312. Those are online simulations. I think those kinds of things are key because of what the test now asks them to do. They have to manipulate variables. They have to develop investigations on their own in the midst of the test using online simulators. And so we need to be able to expose them to that and get them practice with that before they're asked to do it on the test. They're also just cool, and they let us do things that we can't easily do in the classroom. I can grow things in 30 seconds that would take 6 to 8 weeks, and get data to work with that they can then analyze and use their mathematical computational practice. Nearpod and WeatherStem have been around, but those are also available in terms of lesson design, simulations, and then actual data. WeatherStem is on Tolland High School's roof and is available to any teacher in Tolland, and they use that data. Grade 6 in particular uses it. So next steps then are, this year the focus is on assessment. It was one of the weaker areas of those CREC bundles. The tasks were there, but not so much of the evaluation and what are my expectations and my grading of those. So that is being developed now, and teachers have been going to those workshops and will continue to do so. Again, I mentioned we're going to continue the collaborative coaching with other grades. Continued release time is also already in motion this year to keep these units going and add pieces. One of the key things is going to be the partnership. So you saw some of the things that are sort of developing naturally, expanding that. The more we can connect to the community around us in these, and again, make it real to students and expose them to professionals who become mentors in many different ways, is going to be absolutely key to making this truly authentic. And then in terms of branching out as well into STEM, we've got a couple of things already going, but looking to develop those further. So STEM Femmes is run by the Connecticut Women's Hall of Fame, and provides, we run that at the middle school, and provides girls an opportunity to do hands-on tasks with women that work in STEM fields, professionals in the fields, so they get to talk to them and learn from them about what they do, why did they do it, how did you get there, what kind of struggles did you have, but also let's do this cool rocket experiment at the same time. So it was a blast, they absolutely loved it. TMSE already runs, again, that is something where students are doing independent projects of their own interest. We need to be connecting them to mentors, both in Tolland and beyond, to help expand that experience for them. And we got the Invention Convention off the ground last year with 6th grade students. We had 2 students that were recognized and sent to the nationals. One actually was able to go, but they were recognized at the state level and sent to the national competition already. So we want to expand that, probably in both directions. I've had teachers express interest at TIS. I'm trying to find some interest, and I think I got it at the high school as well, and then expanding it in the middle school to kind of create a bigger experience and opportunity for kids. If you've ever seen what they come up with, it's absolutely amazing. The other piece that I'm starting to peck away at now is I believe we have a very clear opportunity for an engineering pathway. Initially at the high school, but I see opportunities, as I was just sort of alluding to, back all the way through 3 through 5. So we can easily build in some things. We're already embedding more robotics and coding opportunities at the high school with Vex Robotics. We're also looking at a coding with drones program, which I think is a slam dunk. I mean, who doesn't like flying drones? And they have to learn how to code in order to fly them. So come on, I mean, that's a gimme. And in that particular program, they learn Python, which is a huge language if you're going to get into that field to learn at any given time. The cool thing would be the core class connections. This is work I had done in my prior position, where you're still teaching the same content, but you're going to do it through a bit of a different lens. So they were going to have, you saw it in chemistry, for example, there are already plenty of engineering examples that are there. Let's strengthen those, let's make that a bigger piece so that kids are learning through that engineering lens because they've already expressed an interest in engineering as their potential career pathway. This isn't about locking them into that as a career pathway, this is about exploration. Do I want to do this or not? Let's try and find that out before you're spending thousands of dollars in college to find out, one way or the other. And then again, the Invention Convention, Hour of Code's a great connection. UConn School of Engineering, bringing students up to the senior exhibition of their senior projects is amazing. Amazing. We have Rage Robotics in town and trying to partner with them and what they do. There's a lot of, again, opportunities that I think that's something we need to start taking a serious look at. And one last thing before I open up for questions. Integration is going to be the other key here over time, both across content areas within science, so that things like this don't happen, where a physicist is looking at a blue jay and just seeing bird, 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 bird. And across content areas so that kids can get that joke. So integration is going to be a key piece as well. So with that said, questions, thoughts?
I just want to say, first of all, my daughter absolutely loved walking over at Crandall Park and doing that whole unit. So the hands-on science is a real thing, and it's happening. And the fact that you were hired in the summer of 2018 and you've gotten all this stuff organized is a huge plus. So good job on that. Thank you very much for doing that for our kids.
I just want to say, as a student at the high school, I'm graduating this year, and I cannot name, I don't know about Alexandra, I cannot name a single science class that I do not remember since 6th grade.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that just goes to show where we are as a district, and
for good reasons.
Oh, absolutely. Well, there was this one time. No, I'm in AP Physics right now, and 25% of our classroom time at least has to be dedicated to lab work.
Yep.
And when you're hands-on, with that as a minimum requirement, like when people always say like, oh, make learning fun. the science educators we have in this town take that to the fullest. And I mean, look at the high school. We've got the health science club. A bunch of kids put that together because they love it, not because they had to, not because a teacher wanted to, but because these kids have loved science because of how they have been taught. So I just find that really important.
Bless and thank you.
Yeah. I'm in Yukon Chem right now.
Sorry.
No, I love it, and I think that as like I progressed throughout the younger grades, having all that science background has really helped. Like I know people that aren't interested in science, but like the stuff in Tolland and the classes definitely are supportive of the people that want to go into science fields.
I know calling snow days can sometimes be a challenge for Dr. Willett. Do you think that might be something the 6th grade can help him with?
That's what we hope to be able to do by the end of that. That is their phenomenon. So. Although I'm going to guess we're not here very often in the winter.
What's it?
I'm going to guess we won't be here very often in the winter.
Winter's off.
Yeah.
I'll be like, the 6th graders decided.
So, something I noticed was that it just went up to chemistry, which I'm assuming is 11th grade, yeah?
For the most part, yes.
Yeah, so as far as like kind of your advanced courses, I'm hearing there's chem, Yukon Chem's at ECE?
Yes.
Yeah, and then you're in AP, what are you?
Yeah,
what are you taking?
There's an integrated science
Yep,
in
ninth
9th grade.
Yep.
10th grade was bio,
Chem.
and then I'm in AP Physics. I'm in AP Physics 1, which is the pre-calc algebra based one. Then AP Physics 2 is the mechanics calculus.
That sounds very fun.
I'm only doing the first semester.
Very cool. So in the 12th grade, the kids have a couple of options.
Yes, we have a few electives in terms of botany and environmental science. The AP offerings are very good in terms of biology, chemistry, physics, and we have an environmental science that's developing. That will be a UConn partnership as well.
Yep, easy.
Yep. So there's what's nice is what has happened in the AP transition to the College Board has very much mirrored this NGSS transition.
Okay, good.
I saw that
I
for biology
about
at the time. Yep.
Yeah.
So it's a great alignment and continuation.
Thanks.
I have a question about the bundles. The bundles are what the teachers need to implement the program.
So the bundles are the units.
So, okay.
Yeah.
And so you said you want to tailor on these, like what do you guys feel is missing, like what would help?
Well, let me give you one example of one thing we did right off the bat, that Connecticut geology one. The initial bundle that was written was, the phenomenon was, why is India where it is? Because again, it's about plate tectonics, and India crashed into Asia, and that's the Himalayan mountains. That's great for those of us that geek out on earth science. Most 7th graders don't care where India is or why, but will care about Connecticut. Well, yeah. That's not gonna work either. But looking at the Connecticut map of the stones that they're standing on right here and being able to understand that and tell that story, because there's, geology in Connecticut is amazing. I mean, people come here to study it because of that, so let's take advantage of that. Those are the kinds of things that we're looking for to make it more relevant and more connected to the students. So we did ask students at the end of last year whether they felt that the phenomenon in each unit was relevant, and based on that feedback made some changes. Honestly though, the vast majority of the units and phenomena were received very well by both teachers and students.
Very good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's been great.
Can we answer questions? Do you have any plans for doing any kind of planetary science?
As an independent course?
Yeah.
Not at this time.
Especially given all the Mars and the Moon and.
So that end of it is in there. So they get into, especially in 9th grade, there's one around the Apophis asteroid, which is a potential Earth impacting asteroid. They do a lot of stuff with orbital motion, planetary motion. And the end of that is thinking about all the things that are involved, all the lovely math that's involved in figuring out how you launch something from Earth to potentially land on an asteroid that might alter its course. So it does come in through those angles. It's not your traditional, like, today we're going to talk about Jupiter. It's not that at all.
I wasn't thinking that.
No, I know, but it's, yeah. That's where, especially where it comes up. But it was also in 6th grade initially.
More relative to what's going on.
Yep.
Just a quick question. Is there still the integrated science 2 class?
So
What does that entail?
there is not.
It's not-
We took a look at that.
Okay.
Yeah, so the initial thought was that they wouldn't be able to cover the 5 bundles in the integrated science course in a single course. couple of pieces to that are the state has determined that certain standards won't be tested. Some of those were related to the 9th grade course, so we knew that we then could be able to do it in a year.
Okay.
The other concern I had is if that was the case, we then basically had to require 4 science courses. IS1, IS2, biology, chemistry, to cover all of the performance expectations in high school prior to the 11th grade test. That eviscerates kids' opportunities for electives and APs, and so we had to find a solution to that anyway.
Okay.
So as of, this is the last group of kids who had the opportunity for IS2 because we didn't want to take away their chance to be exposed again to all the performance expectations, but incoming 8th graders went into the full course, full year IS, integrated science.
Okay. First of all, I'm a numbers person. I always hated science growing up.
Which I don't understand.
But seeing this, I probably would have liked it. And
Nope.
the odd thing is I have 3 kids, and they're the biggest science nerds that I know.
That's fantastic.
Oh, I don't think so. They love it. If this I would have liked. I wish my kids had this kind of program, and they all graduated from Tolland, and they all had excellent science
Yep.
programs. My girls all did at least 3 to 4 years of science in high school. My middle daughter decided she wanted to be a nurse after AP Bio. I don't remember the teacher's name, but she does. My youngest, she took 2 sciences her senior year. That sounds like torture to me, but she loved it. And she's doing a biochem major now with a biology double major, so loves it. He was picking on her last night for it. But my question is, I know in college, she's literally in classes that 6.5 hours a day, 3 hours of it is class, 3 to 3.5 hours of it is additional lab. So I know Fisher mentioned that you're doing about 25% hands-on. And when you were talking about the models, are those models that are computer-driven models, or are they more like actual hands-on?
So modeling, interestingly, it's been one of my pet peeves in this transition because Connecticut has presented it primarily in the drawn-out model on a big piece of poster paper, which is not the case. When you look at the actual practice, it does include those computer-simulated models. The way that the curriculum is built is that should start to appear more and more, the computer-driven models, as students get older, because there is certainly a technological aspect to manipulating and creating them. I will say, however, it's an area of weakness for teachers in terms of expertise to really utilize that well. So there are people like Mr. Barlow, who's a prime example of someone who's latched onto modeling and using it well and has the aptitude to do the computer simulation end of it and get kids creating simulations. That needs to happen more. If that's very much going to be a work in progress.
My other question was, you mentioned the STEM Femmes was in the middle school, and I was wondering if there's any ability to bring that forward to the high school, because again, like with my youngest, she's in Delta Epsilon, she's in the STEM honors program, but she didn't have a lot of, it was all self-sought in Tolland, like all the classes that she took, there wasn't really that kind of program there, where in college, it's fully embraced that, she's in the WISH, which is the Women in STEM's honors program, so.
Yeah, we definitely need to look, that's an issue near and dear to my heart, which is why I brought them here. She's unfortunately statistically uncommon.
Yes.
It's very typical for girls to be interested in science all the way through high school and then not pursue that beyond that. Historically. But I would like to expand that, yes. Right now, the earlier the better, which is why I targeted the middle school first. And Mrs. Grady was right on board immediately, so it was an easy connection. But it is something where we need to make sure we sort of maintain that mentorship opportunity throughout the grades.
This is great, thank you.
Thanks for the presentation. I was really impressed. I know just since the time I've graduated, it looks like it's changed quite a bit, and that's for the better. I did have one kind of question / comment that you kind of touched on near the end, which is kind of like integrating science across different subject matters. I think particularly with math up in the upper level subjects. I remember this from my own personal experience. That was quite a learning curve there.
Right.
And I was just kind of curious if you could speak a little bit more to that, and especially with calculus and things like that, making sure that students have the proper prereqs when they go into those upper classes.
Yeah, so the integrated science course in particular has a lot more math than any typical 9th grade class used to have.
Okay.
So it does bring that relationship in a little earlier, because you're right, it was a massive jump usually from sophomore to junior year with chemistry as a math heavy course. and then physics beyond that. The level of math typically ends or targets, I guess, around Algebra 2, early Algebra 2 in science classes for the most part. Where you see the calculus level math is in the AP that is calculus based. So that really is the only opportunity where it gets to that level of math course, or math integration, I guess. Where I've seen the most cry, honestly, for integration is in the elementary grades, because they have that and are looking for that again. And there's tons of opportunities. The nice part is these bundles did provide a ton of texts related, so it can be done during ELA as well as during science. We were actually talking today with 4th grade about that Gizmos resource and the math that brings in. We were generating data that students will be able to analyze in 4th grade. So we're trying to build those pieces in earlier as well, and not just let that be the high school's job. That's good. Yeah.
Any other questions?
Just a couple of quick notes. The engineering pathway that we're working on is another extension of the Lighthouse projects that we've been knocking out for the last couple of years. So now that we're close to year 3 and entering 4 and 5, we're starting to expand that concept so that we have these pathways, these STEM pathways, but particularly in this case engineering. And that has the great opportunity for the Tolland Public School District to be able to have excellent programs, have certain possible graduation benefits to the children and the young adults who are involved, and it also protects your district from attrition to magnets and charters that that say they have specializations and things, but really don't do a better job than we do here. So this will help highlight that, and that's part of the the initiatives we're working on. The bundles that Mr. Reed, you're talking about, years ago, Tolland sent teams of science teachers to work in an area rest to create these bundles. So we were part of the team that created these bundles, and ultimately then we got deals on using these bundles, and thanks to Mr. Rudy, he's taken these things and made them integrated in everything that we do, which could not possibly have been done without him, and updating the assessment. So he's done a Herculean job in making all of that happen. And can you just imagine what would happen if we didn't have you? We really, really needed you. And thank God for that, because Mr. Mallory, all the advantages we have now are because we have our curriculum supervisor.
Yes.
So we've made some real progress thanks to you, and we have a lot of great things going on that will continue into the future.
My pleasure.
Thanks.
Sure.
I had one
Sure.
question. I'm an engineer and a scientist, but I didn't know what engineering I would go into until I got to college and
That's
was
also
a semester in.
Yep.
I knew I'd be going, I knew pretty much I would be doing chemical engineering, but is there anything to help the senior level for the seniors to decide if they are going to do engineering, which specialty to look at, where they have an affinity to, or is it going to be more once you get to college, you go, hey, I really like chemistry, or I really like physics, or...
Yeah, so this is an exact problem that I tackled in my first go-around with Manchester, and was just talking to the tech ed department about the other day. So we're going to revamp the introduction to engineering course to provide more of a direct exposure. Because you say to a kid, what do you want to be? Oh, I want to be an engineer. Well, oh really, what kind? An engineer. They have no idea, for one, in many cases. And for two, they have no idea of the full amount of choices there are. Many people don't know about civil engineering, for example.
Yeah.
And so we want to build units in that course around each of those areas of engineering, so they get to explore the career, play around with some of the tasks and some of the engineering that goes on in that. The partnership with UConn School of Engineering and the engineering ambassadors would do just that. So I was bringing them in to highlight and talk about why they went into civil engineering. I'd like to get them that exposure well before senior year, so they can think about that as they're then choosing the schools as well, and have a little bit more enlightenment in terms of that process.
All right, and then I'm a bit of a glutton for punishment. I did a double major in chemical engineering and chemistry.
Huge.
Is there a focus on getting the science part into the engineering? I assume it is there, but there's two different career paths there to chemical engineering or chemistry, depending on if you want to do macro stuff or micro stuff.
Right. So that's where the engineering practices and engineering standards make that a no-brainer. It's pieces are there. We need to strengthen them. We need to build them. But yeah, in my vision, this engineering pathway incorporates the science classes and the math classes. We should be teaching Algebra 2 through an engineering lens, for example. in my mind. I talked to them about that, so don't say anything, but that would be the goal, is to have core classes across content areas, engaging kids in the thinking relative to this area of interest for them. Because that not only gives them a chance to explore the career and skills, but also decide, again, before they're going to college and paying $1,000, is this really something I want to do? And I had many of my medical career students go both ways with that. Yes, this is absolutely it. No, thank you for helping me figure that out. Good, go explore another pathway.
Jeff, we never realized how many talents you have. English,
Yeah, we did.
science.
We do.
Master number cruncher.
Yeah, so one semester I had over 40 hours of classes because I had 5 labs, 4 of them were 5+ hours long.
And no one advised against that?
They don't count labs, they don't count labs
Yeah,
like
you're
they
right,
should,
actually,
you know,
they
guys,
don't.
my daughter's 3.5 is 1 credit.
Yeah.
When we got our course schedule, I showed a business friend of mine who had managed to not schedule any classes on Tuesdays and Thursdays and says, what are you doing?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I went through one of those semesters too, so I can feel your pain.
And I do have to say, he mentioned Mr. Barlow, our physics teacher at the high school, and he, when you get to your senior year and you're taking physics, and it's a lot of that engineering physics, he tries and puts in as many interdisciplinary things, so you have an example of as many kinds as you can at least think of at the high school level. So I think that definitely helps with it too.
We're going to be leveraging him quite a bit.
He's
the work we do there.
He is really amazing, and that class is a highlight of my day every day. So.
No, go ahead,
Great.
Can I just
Christine.
ask you, do you have any thoughts on ECE versus AP?
So when I taught biology, it was both AP and ECE. I'd like to see us offering both when we can. The unfortunate thing in chemistry in particular is it's very hard to do. UConn is, the chemistry department is very particular about doing
Curriculum
exactly
kind of
what they
fights
do.
with it, right? The two curricula. kind of
Those two in
fight.
particular, yeah. So UConn very much wants you to do what they do, give their tests. Other departments are not as strict about that. So I was able to do that in biology with a few extra labs that UConn offers that AP doesn't. We can do that, we think, in environmental science. That way, it's the C or better requirement for the college credit, but it also gives them the opportunity, if for some reason they're not getting it that way, they can demonstrate through the AP test. And then it comes down to, am I going into science as a major? Well, then a 3 is usually good enough to get credit. Otherwise, my 4 or 5 may get me credit, and I don't have to put that C on my transcript, for example.
Right.
So I think it offers a
yeah.
benefit.
I like that idea. I know from my son has the UConn ECE credits, but I would say at least 50% of the schools he's looking at won't take them.
And that's true about AP as
Yeah.
well. So that also gives you that double dip.
Okay.
Sometimes they'll take AP and not the ECE,
Okay,
sometimes
because
they'll
I'm
take
finding
the other
most
way.
of them
So.
will take AP as long as you got a 4 in the exam, but I think we didn't realize that he probably should have just taken the AP exam, because at least it would have given him more
Another
options.
Yep.
Okay.
Just one other additional comment on that. Quite a few kids matriculate to some of the schools that take the ECEs here, so that's why there's been energy around them. The catch-22 is that the U.S. News World Report and some of those things don't count them sometimes in their analysis. They go straight to the AP. And the deeper you go into that, that has to do with College Board. And I encourage anyone to research the College Board and where all that comes from. There's a whole interesting progression with the College Board and AP in this country with respect to some of that. So there's a lot to talk about with respect to those kinds of things, but so that can be a trade-off sometimes. The U.S. News Report won't count ECs, will count EPs, things like that.
Any other questions?
Mark Dennis with a cold too, so.
Don't tell them that. You're on that right now.
He was looking at the weather sim ready. He knows it's gonna be cold.
That's the whole biological.
So how do we put the,
I have an MBA as well.
Oh, stop.
Wow.
And a state proclamation.
You got
Yes.
it all, yeah.
I'll
And
be
a
able to
golden
do it.
apple. That's not, you know.
That's
Trying to put that into college.
Somebody with that.
Okay, so the next item on the agenda is G3, which is transportation. It seemed important to get this out there. We did recently and finally were able to get information that we needed. It's not easy to get, and it requires putting together a lot of information and then a time period where you're working with the company to get valuable feedback and then information from them that ultimately turns into a proposal. So we did receive a proposal. We worked through a span of the last year or 2 years, and I know there's been conversations on this as part of the board record and with the FFC. Not an easy process, not a lot of comparative data to work with, a lot of different variables involved with transportation contracts. So getting apples to apples is very, very hard. We did talk to a consulting group, a consulting firm, and we talked to another consortium. And so in the process of getting the best information possible, both the consulting group and the consortium informed us that this kind of deal, the kind of terms we have here are very favorable with respect to the market right now and what's going on in transportation. At least 8 other districts we were calling around to talk to. Again, it's very difficult because parameters are very difficult. Tolland has some specific pieces to its transportation needs that are unique. We have some state roads, we have some extremities, we have some roads that are not completed, dirt roads. These all play into some of the factors. And although most of these other towns are different, there are some similarities we can pull. Many contracts right now are coming in the range for the first year and subsequent years of 10 to 20, 10%, 12.5% for a first year, and then have subsequent years beyond that in the 4s or 5s, which puts them very, very high. We worked very hard with First Student to get this to be a favorable proposal for Tolland. What's driving the contract issues right now for transportation are the employee benefits. In this case, mostly driver retention for these companies is very, very difficult right now. So if anybody knows the market, they're having a really hard time retaining drivers. And because of that, they need to provide better wages. Those wages are pushing up the contracts for everybody that has them. We've also spent a lot of energy looking into whether our own bus force would be a possibility. And that has an amazingly large upfront cost with not too much of a recognizable benefit for the town, or at least not with a town or school system of this size. So getting our own bus fleet also was not something that looked like it would benefit the town. At this point, there are only a couple of companies that would probably have interest in Tolland, and we've got a general idea of who they were, who they are, who they would be. And we've also talked and researched towns that tried to go into a consortium arrangement that ended unfavorably for them. And ended up creating a situation where they were backed into a contract corner, and they ended up with a significantly higher 3-year or 4-year arrangement than they would have otherwise desired. And there's one in particular, one that we learned about fairly recently. So, multi-town bids organized through RESCs, things like that, haven't worked out really well. Town contracts right now, about 5 of the towns we talked to have roughly 3% every year, which is roughly what this is equating to. One town had a 6% in year 1, and then 4.75 over the subsequent 2 years. Another town had 4.45, and then 3.95 for the next 3 years after that. All of them are coming out at or higher than the arrangement that we were getting with First Student right now. This is reviewing a number of the area towns. And then finally, yet another one had a 7 and a 5 and a 5. Once again, much higher than what we were facing with this particular agreement, or rather proposal.
So when this proposal came out, and we really looked at it, we chewed on it, we called all the people we could call, we looked at the consortium information and what had happened, we looked at consulting groups' feedback, we looked at another area, large group that informs us. And again, we keep getting back that this is a favorable agreement for Tolland. So I needed to get the information out as quickly as I could because we do have to go to bid very soon if we were not going to make a decision about it, whether it happens now, next week, or within a short span of time. Typically, if you get into December and anywhere past that, you greatly compromise your ability in the bidding process. It takes about 6 months for that to get played out, and companies will lose interest in us the longer we wait. So depending on the timeline that we face, and I wasn't sure what that timeline would be, I wanted to get the information posted publicly as soon as I could. Perhaps someone seeing this will say, hey, I know a town that has such and such arrangement and it's far better than that, and we'll be able to go ahead and look at that town and see what the differences are. But getting this information out as soon as possible has no downside and only an upside, regardless of what actions are taken tonight. And we did do our homework and ran our bases on talking to a number of different entities and looking at other towns. And so that's why it was so important to kind of get this out as soon as we could, because more than anything I have had experience with yet, these transportation contracts are hard to get comparative data on, and you lose your ground very quickly in terms of bidding the longer that you wait. And Tolland has some unique elements to it in terms of its undulating hills and state roads, and again, the unpaved roads, certain things that would make us potentially, would be factors in the situation that we face. So, Ms. McLaughlin, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Just to reemphasize that trying to look at other communities, there are circumstances that are different just by virtue of the size of the community, the student population, the terrain, the distribution of their schools, their bell hours, and a whole bunch of other things. So it is difficult to find a true apples to apples comparison.
So this is a sticky situation, and I realize that, but getting the information out as early as possible, this meeting occurring gave me the opportunity to put this on the agenda for this meeting. There's no reason why I shouldn't put this information out on this particular occasion, because it benefits us to have that out there sooner. And I can't think of a reason why it wouldn't benefit for us to have it out there sooner than later, regardless of what you decide to do tonight.
Mark, I might have missed it. Have you looked at other companies, like quickly, or whatever? Towns, not towns, but like first student, and then what's the other thing?
So there's DATCO, there's M&J, but they have to show, so they have to show interest in you.
But isn't that what the consultant was doing?
We spent a lot of time working with different entities on this to get the best, and we have learned a lot about Tolland and how the companies would react to Tolland. And while I think it's possible to do a great job of bidding, and we have really dedicated people who will work extremely hard for you to do that, and in all frankness, the very easiest thing for me to do here would just say go out and bid, because it covers all the bases. But I think you might have a contract here that is better than what we will get, and I have to put it out there because of that. I think that there are some things that that we should at least look at in this and say, this looks pretty favorable. And it's not just me that thinks that, but that is the feedback that we've received. When we have reached out about this, we've received information that consistently tells us that this arrangement would be a good one. Have you received any information, Ms. McLaughlin, that would suggest that this was a bad deal that we would be getting under this proposal?
No, not at all.
So we have to share this as early as possible based on that feedback, and I understand. But I would rather face the scrutiny than not provide the info at the earliest possible opportunity. So that's basically where it's at, regardless of ultimately what is done.
Any questions on that?
Yes, Christine.
So when you said, or when it was earlier, it said that the average bus years was 11 years, and now that would be 5.7, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
Out of, I guess my concern is out of all the bus breakdowns we have, are those typically the buses that are in service for 10 or 11 years?
Yeah, that's part of our problem right now, is that what we have are those 11-year-old or even more buses. This would split that time in half. It would make the buses 24, most of the buses would be like the 2014.
Okay, so if the 5.7 average, it's not like 20 of them are gonna be 11 years old and 20 of them are gonna be brand new?
No, it's for the average, these will start getting replaced. The average for the first year will be 5.7 years, 6 years and 9 years. It'll be splitting it in half. They'll be mostly 2014 models.
So as far as the 2014 model buses, historically they have been, I guess, running well, that we're not gonna have these typical bus problems where kids are getting on new buses on Old Stafford Road because their bus
They'll run
breaks
much better
down.
than the 2003s, right? Or the 4s, which is kind of what we're dealing with right now.
So what would be the oldest bus, I guess, that you think that they would end up putting into service?
I mean, I'm thinking that you're looking at a 2010
okay.
as the oldest, possibly. I mean, using that right now in this, but I can't imagine it going too much more than that. That's about where I think we'd be. Don't you think, Mr. McLaughlin?
If anything, those would be the spares.
Okay.
Yeah. And the thing is, this is why this is also very favorable. It splits the age in half. They get a much younger, much newer group of buses. You know, there's many favorable pieces to this.
Okay, thank you.
There's a couple questions. So the first question is, there was a mention of that you have gone out to RFP before. Does anybody really remember like when that was? Just out of curiosity, how long ago that might have been?
So in reference to that question, I said I would research and get back because it goes beyond the time that I've been.
So it's more than.
I don't know if you have. Frankly, I know that the information I received is that you had a 20-year relationship that during the times they have looked
Just wanted to know if you knew off the top of your head. That was
Yeah, I can
no
speak to
need.
that.
I'm not grilling anyone.
Yeah, in our first year on the board, we've gone out to bid with the prior superintendent, and the result was there's not a lot of interest in town. From a transportation perspective, town's a very difficult town. We got hills, we have dirt roads, you know, we have our own climate. And so I think we had 3 responders. First student who currently has a contract, maybe M&J. No, I've talked to them. They think they're not all that interested in town. I don't know.
So
they're not that interested, but I think there weren't that many.
Okay.
And
So that was one question. So the percentages, because I noticed like from one year to the next, like you're losing a bus from the first year to second. So do the percentages take that into consideration that you're losing a bus?
Yes,
You know,
so
route
it's
or
the
whatever.
6 4s with the reduction of a bus, then the next year the 0 would be with the reduction of a bus, then third year it stays with the same level of funds.
Okay, and just to be clear, I mean, I understand what it's like to have a relationship with a bus company and, you know, you can call them and they're responsive and I mean, so I'm not criticizing, I'm really just trying to get information.
No, in no way am I taking it that way. I
Okay.
appreciate the question, and we do, I mean, that's part of the agenda item too.
Do you have any sort of optic that shows, like you had mentioned, you reached out to a couple towns or whatever and sort of gotten a rough idea of what theirs are? Do you have any of that that's like maybe on paper, a chart, anything? Or just sort of, we just called and it was not bad, it was not good?
Yeah, I mean, I do. It's, so for instance, one of the companies and one of the groups we called said, I will tell you this, but I do not want you to speak of our name in public session. So you know, that's the thing about transportation contracts. You know, towns are very different with their compositions, you know, the kinds of things that they need. Some towns have certain assets and others have certain other assets, liabilities equally. So comparing them is very difficult, but in the process of doing that, you know, in this case, we reached out beyond just our own surrounding groups, and we went out and asked a consulting firm about it. This is going back to last year. And so we got a really good picture of what the market and the context is. And we dealt with First Student in a one-year contract last year. Subsequently, we made some statements and drew some lines in the sand that they responded to, and we got this proposal. I think that based on all of the information, and I'm happy to talk about it, and if people want to meet one-on-one too. We do feel like this is favorable, and we've been given every indication that this is favorable from the others that we're checking with. So it's difficult though, because it's hard to get that information. You have to sometimes, say, well, okay, I'll tell you this, but for instance, this consortium that did not do well, they really, it's not something that everybody wants to talk about.
Thank you. Thank you. That's fine. Go ahead, Tony.
I'm sorry, just a quick question, sir. And I thank you for getting this information out here early. I certainly see what you're saying there. But when the time comes for decision or action to come, will it be just this information, or will you provide a lot of that background that you're speaking of here?
I can and will provide any and all of it. I just have to be careful to not violate any of the confidences that people have.
I understand that. I know, Sam, you said earlier that you have gone out to bid at certain times, and you have done what appears to be a sole source here. I'm just assuming that a lot of that background you talked about is what leads you one way or the other, or how do you find that metric that tells you sole source works versus open competition? And if you have a limited number that are willing to bid on here, do we have a problem coming based on that?
I would, here's the findings, right? It's important to talk about this stuff and put it out there. I don't want to discourage anybody from bidding if we're in a bidding situation. I think we're a great deal for a company that might want to come in. Having said that, we also have an extremely good understanding of the market right now based on the last 2 years of looking at this and this last 6 months and 8 month period even. I think the kinds of things that Mr. Adlerstein was referring to are in play for us. And thus, it's important to put the information out early and try to get the best possible arrangement for Tolland that we can.
Okay.
And just to add to that, he's had 2 consultants look at it, so that's pretty good, because you want somebody who understands all the variables district to district, who really can sort that out. You can't just look at a chart and say this district, there's a lot of differences district to
We worked with a consultant
that go beyond that daily rate. But the rule of thumb is if you're satisfied with your current carrier, they're doing a good job, they have a lot in place, count that for something. That if you feel like you're dissatisfied, and keep in mind, 1% increase is $21,000. And maybe that's what you're talking about. Maybe you could gain, 1%, but then again, you could go out to bid and you could get stuck with that lowest bid that's gonna be 10% higher than your current contract. And you're gonna risk that to try to get a 1% gain with a carrier you're already comfortable with. And that's part of the thinking.
Part of it for me is, was it good enough to bring to you? Like, if it's good enough to bring to you, it's something that should be, that we feel like is competitive, and that the options you might have otherwise, based on, context and timeline, could back us into a corner if we waited too long.
I know that Mark McLaughlin has, just like every district has a list of all the other districts and what their hourly rates are, so it's easy enough to just compare that.
Right.
And just looking at that, these rates are right in the ballpark. But then beyond that, you've done a lot more research than that.
And the bus contract's been discussed at a number of finance and facilities committee meetings as well, where we went through all the different options, and we're really the only problem with this is that it took a while for this bid to come in, otherwise we would have had a chance to review it and put it out there. If we do not take this bid and we go out to bid, they're gonna come back with a bid that's gonna be higher than this, most likely. They're not gonna keep this bid out there. This bid will go away and they'll come back with something higher, most likely. They're not gonna come back with something lower. That's pretty,
Right.
that's the way things work.
Which is the risk. I mean, they know that they're your primary
And
option.
the additional risk is, like Walt said, it takes plus months to put these bids together if we go out. Now you're talking 6 months is May or June. School starts in August. And if we switch companies, you gotta get the old company out and the new company in the span of 2-3 months. That's not something that's gonna be free either.
Well, then let's say,
They're
you
gonna
know,
do routes.
you have some factors here, that's the thing, is that this will play out about a 6-month period, but at the end of the 6-month period, that's what it is. So it's gonna have, you know, we would then have to deal with whatever the conditions were at that moment in time. And the point is that when we are talking to others about it, those conditions 6 months from now probably wouldn't look better than that. And if they did, even if they did, it would not be so much better that it isn't worth, you know, really seriously considering this.
And additionally, when we went through the options, we looked at all the different possible options, some that we haven't discussed here as well, and we saw that per student was the best option. It was just getting their bid in. We looked at what the consultant said as well, and it just became that this was where we wanted to be. It just came, the timing is poor is really what is also here.
And in the process, I called other superintendents and said, hey, you have such and such company, what do you think of it? And those responses were fantastic. So like, you know, you could end up with somebody who said they could do X, Y, and Z, but what's being executed for some of the individuals I talked to wasn't anywhere near X, Y, and Z. So it's like, you know, yeah, they came in at $21,000 less with a 1% difference, but the experience they're having is disaster, and it is not good. So it's again, I'm not even saying that because I think you could get better. Right now, what we're getting from the people we're talking to is that this is a favorable thing for us, and that's why we're putting it out as fast as we can to get as much people seeing it as possible.
What's the deadline? Sorry. Oh, good. What's the deadline for, it automatically goes out to bid or this contract is rescinded?
So here's the thing. We have to go out to bid very soon, or we lose the window for bidding that gives us the most competitive opportunity. There's no exact date, but if we can't push past, I would want to know what we were going to do mid-month in November, because at that point, we need to have that whole cycle, to be most competitive in bidding, we need to have that full 6-month period to be most competitive in bidding. So the timeline just push it, all of the timing of everything lined up not great. You know, this is what it is, but it doesn't change the fact that, you know, that this is what we've got, we gotta get it out as soon as possible, and then ultimately people chew on it. If people wanna go out to bid, so be it. We will execute that duty to the greatest extent of our abilities and every other resource we have. The reason this is here is because what we're getting is that may not be it. You know, that we restated that this is favorable for Tolland, and that you may not end up with something different, but you could be back into a corner, in other words.
And given the funky roads that we've got in town, having some institutional memory with those bus drivers, you know, that our kids know already is probably a good thing as well. I don't know if you guys remember about the New Haven Board of Ed and the superintendent trying to save some money, so they switched their routes, and it was a total fiasco. So it's just something.
Oh, I could play transportation horror stories.
Yeah, I mean, you know, we want to get our kids safely, so I mean, I'm just putting that out there. Like, I think that this is a prudent way to go about it. That's just what I think.
Well, what's driving the cost for all of these companies is roughly the same. Right? So you just got to think about the players and who's got the capacity and things like that, because the things that these companies are facing are roughly the same. They're higher wages because of the competitiveness of the driver jobs and, you know, certain other driving factors. And it will push up more.
No, I was just gonna point out, as far as timing with new board members coming in, you also have to establish your committees. So for instance, finance and facilities, establishing that committee and setting your monthly meetings is also gonna push you out. So it's really not ideal to wait that long.
Yeah, like, you know, I think Ms.
I just had a quick question. So as a parent, I was a little disappointed in first student, as my son was on the bus breakdown quite a few times last year. As the board and the superintendent, were you happy with that? Like, do you think we can't do any better? That that's just kind of the status quo and we're gonna pretty much have to expect that, whether it's DATCO, whether it's M&J?
So what I partially inherited was an arrangement where the age of buses you have is part of it, right? So that plays a factor because part of the agreement that was previously had was one that included buses that were older. Those buses do have a higher propensity for having issues. Mr. McLaughlin and I have made a number of different efforts with respect to the first student. And the first student has responded in a way that we feel has been good. The situations that were occurring a few years ago were occurring with much higher frequency than they are now, even though there's things like that happen. I think once we cut the age of the buses in half, you'll see even fewer.
Okay.
You know, so with the improvements that we've made, you know, coupled with the half of the bus life, you'll see a lot better of an experience. But I understand where you know, feel like that.
And the average age of fleet at 11 years is a little crazy. I mean, I would have to think that improving that to 6 years
So
is.
thinking about the work that we've done to make it work with that age bus is actually, there's not a lot, there are things that happen, but there could be a lot more.
Do we have cameras on all our buses?
I don't think we have them on all of our buses.
The majority of the buses we do, there might be a couple right now in the fleet that don't have cameras on, but majority we do.
How about GPS?
Yeah.
That's a software availability that they're working on and get that up, try to get that up and running.
And the first student promotes their parent app. If you go to their website, they show, it's in a town like Tolland, it's kind of nice where we have group stops and you can know when the bus is coming up to, yeah. And then, would they be willing to do 2 more years, do a 5-year if, was that
They
an option?
may be willing to do 5 years.
If you could do 5 years, that kind of incremental increase for the last 2 years might be nice to, something for the board to think about.
I just have one comment. I think what's concerning, obviously I'd like to learn more details about it and dig in myself. But it does seem like a fair contract, and it is concerning because then if we do go back out to bid, then we're throwing it into the wind and hoping it lands flat. And knowing the navigational issues in the town, and knowing, and having comfort as a parent or as other parents with their children going in, the bus driver that comes to my street has been doing that route since before I can remember. So the consistency and the comfort of my child going with that same consistent person, and then concerning with the way the timeline goes, and then having this new company go through a training process, and then all of the problems that's gonna snowball effect from that. We already have problems the first day of school, right? First couple weeks of school with a company that knows our town inside and out. So I think, we should also look at, there's always going to be, in any business or in any logistical aspect, there's going to be a breakdown, there's going to be a repair, there's going to be these things. Of course, we don't want them to be our children, but the reality of it is that is that's a cost of doing that kind of business. So, grass isn't always greener, I guess, is what I'm trying to get.
The easier thing that could have occurred here would be that some proposal came forward that just made it really easy to go out to bid. that would have been easy. That would have just been, then I wouldn't have even brought it, it would have been an easier thing, you know what I mean? This is a harder thing, because this actually is stable, and it's something that could be lost, and that's the problem.
Love this interaction. Everybody, any other questions? Jacob?
Well, I'm just digesting all this information.
All right, I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, I understand the time constraints, and obviously you don't want to make it really jarring for students coming up next year. My feeling is it's just a large contract, and I'd like to just like wait a week to think about it. That's my thought on it. I respect the other side, but that's just my personal opinion.
Good, Jacob. I mean, what you're saying makes sense, and I think Dana had a couple of really good points. It just sounds like a lot of that information, that analysis that Dr. Willett's talking about, happened behind this one-page summary. And it's difficult to really look at this and comprehend everything you're saying without having any of that background data. And the maintenance issues you're talking about, the time issues, the things that Sam's talking about as far as the limited number of competitive resources out there. Without knowing those things, all we're left with is a single company that says, trust us. And I'm just not sure how we do that.
We're left with that, the experience of a superintendent who's called a number of other superintendents, a consulting firm who told us that the rates.
And do you provide those notes, those conversations that you've had, the lessons that you've learned, do you provide those in some sort of supporting memo?
I can put them in bullets, but you know what I mean. It's in the minutes. Yes, some of it though, like I said, the transportation contracts are the least transparent of anything. You know, like and the characteristics of each town again make a big impact on what's offered.
Right.
So I can actually put together whatever people want, but a couple of things that are being stated tonight is we have a few board members who were on when the last time this came around, which was prior to me, saying they did a few things and it turned out a certain way that led to first student. We contacted a consulting firm that gave us feedback about it, contacted a consortium that gave us feedback about it, looked at a lot of towns around us and gathered that information. I can put them in bullets for next time. They're going to roughly summarize what I've said verbally here and what you've heard verbally here. And beyond that, you know, there really is no central database and I would love it if there was. You know, for instance, negotiations data is a cakewalk compared to transportation, you know, settlement stuff. It's opaque. It's gonna be it's one of those leaps of faith. The fact is, at some point here, we either make a leap of faith that, you know, this looks like a favorable thing, we're gonna go for it,
Right.
or forget it, we're gonna take a chance, you know, and go to bid, like one of those old shows where you take a chance what's behind the curtain.
Right.
And the thing about Tolland's curtain is there's some factors that impact what gets behind Tolland's curtain. So, you know, the most responsible thing for me to do right now is to put this out as early as I could, give you all a chance to then bounce off it in your own mind, and then at that next meeting, whether it's public or a board, ask. Or, you know, if it were me at this point, and I hate committing like this, but I'll say, if it were me, because of all the people that we talked to and the things that we did, you know, this is worth seriously considering, and that's why I put it out.
And I completely
But I totally
agree.
understand the concerns and what you're looking for. I wish I had what you were looking for, and even the places I can go to get a nice nifty chart.
Right.
The thing is that the charts don't consider, and they're still not gonna show unfavorable conditions, but they don't consider the number of people who might actually bid for Tolland. They don't talk, you know, they don't consider the undulating things and, you know, certain factors that Tolland roads have. The kinds of things that the previous board encountered when apparently they did that process. Those haven't gone away. You know what I mean?
No, totally. And those are the
So-
things that you can put in those bullets.
I can put a lot of bullets.
I'm just looking for ways.
I can put so many bullets on this.
Looking for ways to minimize the risk in the take a chance. I mean, how do we make sure, how do we know
Well,
all of
Tony,
the
most of
numbers?
what he's talking here has been discussed in Finance and Facilities Committee meetings as well.
And there are minutes for that we can
This stuff is somewhat proprietary, so the specific details cannot be shared.
I mean,
They can be shared in a very general, this district said this, but
Right.
that doesn't make it into a minutes.
So
about
there's
as
no
detailed
hard
as the town
things.
council does, you know. And the Board of Ed minutes you'll find go on for pages. So compared to them, because the Board of Ed minutes are some of the most narrative minutes I think anyone in this town has ever seen, which is fantastic. Thank you, Lisa. So I can definitely put together a lot of bullets on that. But again, even with that, it's just good to get it out there because at least we can start the conversation at a certain point on the 13th that we could not otherwise start the conversation.
The other thing that we, I don't know if you mentioned, is there's a big driver shortage in Connecticut. You know, that's in part why I was thinking 5 years, because I don't know that it's gonna get any better. You know, and wages, I guess you did mention it in your narrative.
Yeah, the driver shortage, the wages, the 401ks that some of the companies.
There's a lot of uncertainty right now.
And they're all, you know.
So just really quick, and I appreciate what you're talking about, Tony, and of course, I mean, I love reading my data and my profit and loss statements and all that fun stuff. However, we also have to find solace in the fact that there are people and places within our town infrastructure or any infrastructure that are resident experts on a specific topic or what have you. And, you know, Dr. Wood has spoken so eloquently about different resources that he's reached out to do the proper research. I have to find solace in the fact that our superintendent is providing us with the most updated and most thorough information as possible. You know, I'm a brand new board member, not even sworn in yet. I can't say that I would be the most knowledgeable person to make a comment on this. So I have to find solace in the folks that the board that's here and the resources that we have, the committees that they have, and those kind of things. So that's where, you know.
Are you expecting a decision tonight? Usually we do something like this, we would do 2 readings, you know, so I thought you would be kicking this off, having this conversation with the right people in the room, and then I mean, it would be hard for you guys not to be here tonight and have to decide this your first meeting, so this puts you at an advantage.
No, and I think this is a wonderful thing, to be able to hear this now, ask these questions, look for the additional data, and then make the call. I appreciate
The
it.
13th would work. I would be afraid of it going, what I feared a little bit was because of the way that the timing fell and uncertainty, and then what he did, the committee's trying to get it going, right, some destiny coming back. Like, by the time we did all that, we should just go out to bid. We should just do that, because that would put us in, that might push us into December late. We don't want to do that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think that would make sense, and it gives us a start.
I suggest that we do a straw poll here to give our guidance for the next board, and then they make the decision next week, unless the other option would make it this week. And I think the straw poll in the next board, because they're all here.
Have you asked them about a 5-year?
I have not asked them.
And GPS, throw a GPS
I
in?
don't what I don't want to end up with is, you know.
But you know, you can track your kids on.
For years, we've managed to make it work out. If it means a higher percentage increase so that we have GPS stuff, I would
No,
lower.
yeah.
But I will ask those questions for next time.
So are you asking for a straw poll?
I was saying, if we're not gonna vote on it tonight, to give a straw poll if we would support it, if we were voting on it tonight, and
Just
then they
us
vote.
or everybody?
That's not.
Are you saying just
Well,
us?
they can do theirs
Yeah.
next time.
Okay.
It'd be
You're
the
saying.
the current board members that would do the straw poll, because they got next week to,
Oh.
when they're sworn in, to make the decision.
The other thing is people may come up between these 2 times with things that they know that I did not, you know.
Yeah.
That's the idea.
The idea of waiting.
Get as much info as you possibly can because it's not easy to get. So.
I think it's, you know, I've been in conversation with so many people in the room. I think, you know, the time stinks with the election and this. But I think a straw poll here, I do think that the new board members that are here. Should, if Tony and others want at least bullet points, I think that's fair. I think that
Tony does. I don't know.
Tony
Just done with this.
Tony does, and I
agree with
hear
that.
what you're all saying, I totally do, I get what you're saying on that. I was sitting there, like, heck, I'm a new board member, I should be able to vote on that. So I think it's fair for us to do a straw poll. If other people right now wanna ask Walt, I mean, remember, he's a real busy guy, so anything he put on is just extra work as well. Mark, I'm sure can help him with that, I think.
Yeah, I mean,
And I think it, as long as, I mean, you can do whatever you want next meeting, but I would hope that you'd vote on it, you know, to get it going. Does that sound fair? So,
I just want to say before I leave, thank you to all of the board members that are leaving, and to all of the new board members and the incumbent members. Good luck, and to the incumbent members who are sticking around. Thank you.
I'm gonna second that.
We've got our own straw poll right here. What time are we leaving? See you.
thank you guys, have a good night. So, so do a straw poll, how we feel about this contract, that's what we're looking for. In favor of, we're voting tonight, would we want this to be voted on? As a, yes.
Yes.
To go forward. Yes.
That's in 5 years. I just want more information. And I probably mean where it's going out.
So. Transportation.
Can we move from 2 items to next week?
I was saying that to Karen as well earlier, that, yeah, I mean, those.
Can I just make a comment on the next one?
Yes, I told Kate what you said to me, but go ahead, you.
Just a meeting to.
I would just say that that should probably be something the town takes up, not the Board of Ed. There's only been 2 boards in the country to actually do that.
Well, it's all states.
Whereas there's states and cities that have done it all over the place.
Okay.
So the boards themselves, there's only 2 that have done it, and other universities have, but I think it's something the town should do.
It's more of a town thing.
I'd say town versus the school board, so.
I'm cool with that.
And then I agree, the G5 should be done at the next meeting, the first regular meeting of November.
And those are pretty set dates, because we have to do the second and fourth Wednesdays of the month, so they're pretty typical schedule, and typical ones that we cancel around the holidays. I'm fine with that.
You don't need to do any action, right? Take them on, right?
No, that's all right. Action.
I mean, you could, but I'll just roll.
Move the
Your
2020.
decision's about-
Do you need a motion or anything for that?
You're just
to
not
move to
gonna
the
cover
next?
them, and I'll just add them.
Okay.
You could do either. I think you're
Lisa,
just
do you
choosing
want-
not to cover.
Do you want
this.
anything in particular? No, we'll defer. Okay, defer to the next meeting, then that.
Alright, moving right along then to committee liaison report.
Finance and facilities has not met.
I got nothing.
Alright. Chairperson's report, it's my last one. Well, again, congratulations, I may not agree with everybody in the room, but that's okay, and I can move on, and just hope the community comes back together. Good luck, you guys.
Thank you.
Thanks. Oh yeah, good luck to you guys too. And Lisa, I really think you do take fabulous notes. Even my.
You have to at least embarrass you once in a while, Lisa.
You know, my mom had to look at it last time, she was there, right, Lisa? She came over. Are you really typing all that?
She is.
All right, okay. No board action. We've been, public participation, we've been talking together. Was Jaden or Kate?
No,
Wow, that never happened before.
you know,
You're tired.
sometimes it's been a long few days. So
Yes.
good luck to everyone next time.
And thank you, Nate, for already putting yourself out there too.
It was fun. It was
Yeah,
fun.
it is fun.
It's an adventure.
Yes,
That's right.
Yes.
adventure and a half. So it was fun.
Dog.
Hopefully I haven't seen the last one.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Just getting started.
There we go.
All right, no, any points of information on board? Nope. Future item is next week for
Yep, we're gonna have to spend some time, obviously, doing the, I start the meeting next week.
Yes.
We'll select the chair,
Business
and we
stuff.
hand it over to the chair. I can help guide that, but then you start to select each subsequent committee. So I'll create a protocol for that, and we can hand out so everybody can follow.
How are you gonna put information out to the new board over the next 2 weeks, your additional transportation information?
It'll be in the next week.
Well, it's gonna be next week.
Are you gonna put information out between now and then so they can have still those bulleted?
Well, I was hoping to maybe put that out in the meeting rather than post something publicly.
You okay with that?
But that's, I mean, I just have to, I can do it, but I just would rather maybe just jump through it on the 13th.
And typically, once you guys are set up, you'll have email addresses and
We have email
access to the.
Got my email today.
Jen will jump right
Told Jen that.
People.
I mean, if the data comes out next meeting, we'll just have to take the time to bounce it back and forth and act select.
Sure.
You would have another discussion about it on the agenda.
Yeah, beyond the getting it all worked out, that probably would be one of the main times.
Right.
I mean, you can
There's
add
a lot
this
of other
stuff, but that's the thing, is we only have a couple
official
of meetings,
business stuff.
so, you know, we're gonna have other things that we gotta get done.
Are you going to let everyone
They
know
usually help.
the things that need to be decided? Just so everybody knows,
The things that need to be.
the positions that need to be filled and
Mhm.
the committees.
Yes, that's part of,
Okay.
that's why this next meeting, there'll be a sheet that I'll give the chair, whomever that is going to be. We'll go through the whole thing. And you're gonna choose your committees if you choose.
Right. Yep.
Your memberships. All of that.
Okay. Do you guys have questions at your next meeting? I was gonna say, if you have any questions now about any of those, or what it's like to be on those committees. I can think of many that could be good on the finance offices. And a lot of math people, right? Christine, Tony, and Dana. All right, anyways,
There's a couple.
there's a few. All right, any business? All right.
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
Yes, please.
Oh, Sam, you can have it. Give it to Sam.
Give it to Sam.
Aye.
I,
Yes. Aye.